What is poppin' YouTube? Bringing you my Dynasty Cornerstone rankings. So these wide receiver rankings means anyone above the age of 25 is not in these rankings. And after going through these rankings, I can say this. There's a reason it's so hard to get young, talented wide receivers onto your roster, because it gets shallow really quick. If you like Dynasty Fantasy Football, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's go. So when we started off here in our S tier, we're talking about guys that are 3 first values. We, of course, started off with Justin Jefferson. I don't need to talk about why Justin Jefferson is the 101. Yes, he is still under 25 years old. He is 24 years old. He will be turning 25 this summer. So I understand why if some of you may not consider Justin Jefferson a cornerstone asset because he is getting older, but we have seen that elite level production year after year after year. Doesn't matter the quarterback. Give me some Justin Jefferson as my first wide receiver in the Cornerstone rankings. Then we move to my second wide receiver in the Cornerstone rankings, which is also valued at 3 first, and we're going with Ja'Marr Chase. And if you tuned in to my Dynasty wide receiver rankings video a few weeks ago, there's going to be a huge debate here between these two guys, Ja'Marr Chase and CeeDee Lamb. So really pick your poison. They're both valued around the same, both in Dynasty startups on KTC, as well as in the Dynasty Fantasy Football community. So you pick your poison. I'm picking Ja'Marr Chase. I am a Bengals fan, so maybe I'm biased. I'm probably biased, but I just like Ja'Marr Chase tied to Joe Burrow. I'm not worried about T. Higgins, not worried about him re-signing. Give me some Ja'Marr Chase. And then, of course, CeeDee Lamb. We really don't need to debate CeeDee Lamb, why he needs to be in this tier. He for sure got added, bumped up to this tier after his amazing season last season. He's still super young, so give me some CeeDee Lamb. He's in the Cornerstone rankings in this top tier. Now we move down to our next tier, and this might be a little bit of a tier where there are some debates happening, and I hear you. A lot of what I do here, of course, we're evaluating youth. We're only putting guys that are youthful in here, but we also like to evaluate fantasy football points. So the first guy in this tier is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, and if you told me, Caleb, I really feel like Amon-Ra St. Brown should be bumped up to the 3 first tier, I hear you. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has all the capabilities. I think he has all the potential to eventually get into that. I mean, he's the clear wide receiver for now, but I think he could be pushing CeeDee Lamb, Ja'Marr Chase at the end of this next season. Now, you still got Jared Goff. The situation in Detroit is super great. So I do like Amon-Ra St. Brown here in that 2 mid-first category. Then moving to our next player, it's going to be Garrett Wilson. And I hear also the debates of like, Caleb, goodness gracious, why do you continue to push Garrett Wilson here? You right now have him as the Dynasty wide receiver 5 in your Cornerstone rankings. Look at the tape, look at the metrics. If we look at Player Profiler, we can look at his target share the last 2 seasons. And what you're going to see about Garrett Wilson is he is a top 5 target earner. The issue is he has had 0 quarterback help. And we were hoping that Aaron Rodgers was going to solve that issue this season. He ended up not solving this issue this season because he had his own issue after the first series, literally the first snap to deal with. I'm really excited for Garrett Wilson. I think you should be excited for Garrett Wilson. And that's why I have him here in the Cornerstone rankings so high. We move on to our next guy, Puka Nacua, who came out of the literally left field. If you got him off of waivers last season, if you drafted him in the 3rd, 4th round of your Dynasty rookie drafts, congratulations. But Puka Nacua, you could make the argument that Puka Nacua should be going over Garrett Wilson. I just think Garrett Wilson, if he was in the same system, if he was getting the ball thrown to him by Matty Boy Stafford, we would be seeing very similar numbers. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Caleb, I like to see it proven before, an unproven guy, so maybe you move Puka ahead of Garrett Wilson. If that is how you like to rank things, I understand. Like I said, these are my own rankings. This is how I'm evaluating players. If someone offered me Puka for Garrett Wilson straight up, I probably am keeping Garrett Wilson unless there's some type of little cherry thrown on top, unless my team is ultra competitive for next season. But Puka Nacua is still a very valuable asset, and I think Puka Nacua also has kind of that capability to push himself up. I think all these guys in this 2 mid-first tier have the ability to push themselves up overall in the Dynasty wide receiver rankings and the Cornerstone rankings heading into next year. And then the final guy I had to include in this 2 mid-first tier is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., projected top 3 pick in the NFL draft. And even if he doesn't go top 3 because for some reason Jaden Daniels goes to the New England Patriots, that's going to be better for Marvin Harrison Jr. because then he's probably going to land on a team like the Arizona Cardinals or a team like the Chargers, where you already have Kyler Murray or Justin Herbert to throw Marv the ball. And we absolutely love that. I mean, Marv is probably the best wide receiver prospect we've seen come out since Ja'Marr Chase. I think he's even better than Ja'Marr Chase. So I'm excited for that. And I think the issue that a lot of people have with Marv is they like to nitpick the small things, maybe separation. But if you watched Ohio State Buckeyes football this year, you know Kyle McCord, he did not have the rocket of arm. Just watch him with CJ Stroud. You're going to see the type of separation he's able to get, the type of improv that he's able to do on a game-by-game basis. So we absolutely love some Maserati Marv here in the 2 mid-first category. And I hear you. Ja'Marr Chase was only ranked as a top 12 Dynasty wide receiver when he got drafted so high. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is definitely getting pushed towards his ceiling. But when we see a prospect profile like this come out, we definitely have to evaluate and push him accordingly. Now, moving on to our next tier, we got the 2 mid to late first. And we start this off with Malik Neighbors, who honestly if Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't in this class, would be the wide receiver 1 of almost every other class that we've seen coming out, probably since Jamar Chase. So we like Malik Neighbors a lot as the clear wide receiver 2 of the rookie class. He's going to get top 10 draft capital too. So we like him 2 mid, late first. I just couldn't bump him up into the same category back to back with Mark because I definitely wanted there to be a little bit of a tier break to separate that off. Then we move on to Chris Olave, next guy in the tier. However you like to evaluate Chris Olave, feel free. I just, as an Ohio State Buckeye, am definitely a little biased. He hasn't produced up to like the amazing fantasy football standard, but also at the same time, he's been in a lot of the same situation as Garrett Wilson, but he has produced a little bit better than Garrett Wilson. So I hear you if you're going to say, Caleb, I don't understand the disparity between Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave in the dynasty rankings. I just think the Saints right now are in cap hell, and so they're going to have to figure that out, put a team around, and I think that's kind of where I'm at with Chris Olave. Hopefully they can get a better quarterback than Derek Carr, but they're probably rolling out Derek Carr this year again. Then move on to Brandon Ayuk, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with Brandon Ayuk if he gets the contract extension, if somehow he ends up getting traded somewhere. We'll have to see, but we saw Brandon Ayuk absolutely emerge as an alpha level type wide receiver where he surpassed Debo this year, and so I like Brandon Ayuk at the 2 mid to late first category. Then we move to Jalen Waddle, and Jalen Waddle has been an absolute roller coaster of emotions throughout his whole entire career. But if we look at his target share numbers, they're really good. The fantasy football production hasn't necessarily been there consistently. And so that's really where we're looking at Jalen Waddle as definitely a guy where he could go up. You could see him ending up in that next tier next year, or he could go down. So he's definitely a risky investment for me. But I had to include him here in the Cornerstone rankings because a talent like Jalen Waddle, that speed, definitely getting overshadowed by Tyreek Hill in the Miami Dolphins offense. But we do like some Jalen Waddle. Then we move on to Rashee Rice, next guy in the tier. And Rashee Rice absolutely emerged for the Kansas City Chiefs this last year as the rookie wide receiver. They finally figured out how to use him. You know, I think a lot of what we saw from him at SMU, we just weren't able to project comfortably into the NFL. But the Chiefs with Andy Reid absolutely emerged. So I like some Rashee Rice here, ending the 2 mid to late first. Then we move to the 1 mid first, and we got Devontae Smith, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Rome Odunze. So we start off with Devontae Smith, clear wide receiver 2 to A.J. Brown. We still like the offense. We've still seen flashes of him continuing to get more target share each and every year. The frame that we were so worried about him coming out of college with, I'm not as concerned with anymore, but I still would understand the little bit of concern. Then we move on to Nico Collins. Nico Collins had an absolute alpha level emergence for the Houston Texans. I have him back-to-back with Tank Dell because I think, honestly, they have the cap space to go bring in another elite level wide receiver this season, which worries me just a little bit about both of these guys. Tank Dell also coming off injury, but Nico Collins proved that he is an elite level fantasy football producer. If you listen to Matt Harmon at all, Matt Harmon has been preaching Nico Collins in his reception perception year after year after year. So we like Nico Collins, we like Tank Dell, both here in a 1 mid first. Then we move on to Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, 2 rookie wide receivers from last year's class, back to back, also with Jackson Smith and Jigba. If you tuned into Mason Dodge put out over on Dynasty Flock a few weeks ago, talked about how JSN, really his measurables after this pathetic first season are not looking good in the whole dynasty landscape, who he compares to. But I'm still banking on the situation. I'm still banking on Jackson Smith and Jigba as a talent. I still like him better than Rome, but I did have to include Rome here in that 1 mid first category just because you understand how talented Rome is, depending on where he lands. If he lands in Chicago, if he gets one of these first round draft capital, even if he goes as high as the Chargers at 5, Rome Odunze is going to skyrocket in value. I just couldn't honestly put him ahead of any of these other guys, but I can understand if you wanted to as well. Then we move to our 1 to mid late first. We got Drake London, Jaden Reed, George Pickens, and Brian Thomas Jr. A lot of these situations, Jaden Reed might be the most talented wide receiver in the Green Bay Packers organization. Drake London, we're hoping he gets a quarterback. George Pickens, same thing. We hope he gets a quarterback. He's an elite level alpha if he does get one. And then, of course, the very talented rookie Brian Thomas Jr., who will get back end first round superflex rookie capital in the draft. So we definitely like all these guys in this mid-late tier. I just couldn't push them up. The talent is there, but we do have all these guys here in this tier. And then our final tier is going to be the 1 late first tier. We have Josh Downs, Keon Coleman, Troy Franklin, Jamison Williams, and Xavier Worthy. We got a bunch of rookies, so 3 rookies where a lot of their profiles we're a little bit worried about, but we understand the overall outlook, how exciting it is to have all these guys. Then you got Jamison Williams, the absolute speed burner for the Detroit Lions, and then Josh Downs, who had some flashes of production, but how is that going to look with Anthony Richardson? Also, are they going to bring in more wide receiver help alongside Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs? All of those questions, but that's why I have these guys in the 1 late first category. Also, maybe could be an early second category, depending on how you value them. So let me know what you think of these Dynasty Cornerstone rankings. Hit that like button and subscribe button if you like Dynasty Fantasy Football. We're going to be putting out a ton more content this week, so appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one.